Welcome to the debate. When you build a commercial skyscraper, you don't just, start pouring concrete. You demand a blueprint.
Right, yeah.
Every load-bearing wall has to be mapped out perfectly. It's really about safety and predictability.
Well, that is totally true for engineering. But what if you're exploring an unmapped jungle? A blueprint is basically useless there.
I mean, sure.
You need a compass, open eyes, and, the flexibility to adapt to what you actually find in the field.
And that fundamental tension brings us to today's topic. We are looking at the standardization of research protocols, drawing from guidelines by the Indian Journal of Dermatology, the University of Padova, and patent research.
Yeah, it's a pretty dense topic.
It is. So the central question here is, does the enforcement of a rigid research protocol, specifically demanding deductive hypotheses and strictly peer-reviewed evidence, guarantee scientific rigor, or does it artificially restrict the scope of research?
Exactly. And coming at this from the perspective of a student author conducting fieldwork, I argue that these universal mandates actually marginalize inductive inquiry and observational experience.
Right. And viewing this through the lens of a skeptical peer reviewer, I am defending these strict structural requirements as essential safeguards for validity.
I mean, I get why you'd want a plan.
Yeah, if you're listening, you are probably thinking, why would anyone argue against having a clear plan? But science actually requires precision. The Indian Journal explicitly states a hypothesis cannot be a, quote, haphazard guess.
Right. They are very strict on that.
Very. It must reflect deep, pre-existing knowledge. You really have to start with a highly specific, deductive guess and try to prove it.
But see, that assumes all research is deductive. And it's not. I mean, in inductive work, you do the exact opposite.
How so?
Well, you start with zero assumptions. You observe the subject from the ground up, and you just, let the theory build itself.
But without a hypothesis, how do you even...
Hang on. Even the University of Padova's guidelines provide an explicit caveat for this. They say that purely qualitative inductive research does not formulate hypotheses. Forcing a student to guess the outcome up front, it compromises the authenticity of the data.
Okay, but without a hypothesis, how do you structure your methodology? Padova demands you map every single objective to a specific data collection method before you even start.
Right.
Why do they do that? Because it prevents phishing. Gathering a mountain of messy data and then retroactively inventing a narrative that fits.
I hear that. But taking that blueprint approach in a social science setting, it often results in performative compliance. Take PGDM research's mandate for a tentative chapter plan before the study has even begun.
I think that's a highly useful exercise.
But is it? You are forcing researchers to invent a neat, linear narrative just to get approved. It doesn't reflect the messy reality of actual scientific inquiry.
Well, that messy reality often invites bad data, which directly dictates what kind of evidence you are even allowed to look at.
What do you mean?
Padova explicitly instructs researchers to prioritize peer-reviewed literature and heavily discount unverified material. If I am reviewing a protocol that relies on, say, anecdotal personal observation rather than existing literature, I have to question the entire foundation of the project.
Wait, even if that observation highlights an anomaly that the literature completely missed?
Especially then, because anomalies require more rigorous validation, not less.
But dismissing personal observation ignores the genesis of most research problems. Padova itself defines a valid research problem as an unexplained observation or, something that does not fit traditional beliefs.
Sure, but it still needs to be tested properly.
Yes, but think about Alexander Fleming discovering penicillin, the classic moldy petri dish.
Right, a famous accident.
Exactly. If Fleming had been forced to strictly follow a preconceived tentative chapter plan, he would have thrown out that mold because it didn't fit his deductive hypothesis.
Okay, that is a bit of a stretch.
No, it's true. Personal experience and real-world observation are the engines of new scientific paradigms. If we only look at what has already survived peer review, we become completely blind to the anomalies happening right in front of us.
It's a compelling historical example, I'll give you that. But modern scientific validity relies on reproducible structures. We can't just rely on serendipity anymore.
I'm not saying we should abandon structure entirely.
Good, because we both agree on the absolute necessity for methodological clarity and heavily justifying the research gap.
We do agree on that, but we definitely remain sharply divided on the hierarchy of evidence. The rigid compliance that a peer reviewer demands can absolutely stifle the discovery an author is trying to achieve out in the field.
And that tension reveals just how much nuance exists within these methodological guidelines.
It really does.
When you step into the unknown to uncover new knowledge, what serves the pursuit of truth better? The rigid safety of a blueprint or the open-ended guidance of a compass? We will leave that for you to decide.